So 2 weeks ago, we set aside the word worship in favor of the word practice. And the immediate question, of course, is what then do we practice? So I'm curious, has anybody here told anybody in your circles that this Sunday you're going to traditional practice? Has that happened? Yeah. Did they say, what are you going to practice? They didn't? Okay, because that would be I'd be like, what? What are you going to practice on this Sunday morning? So, what do we practice, right? So the answer, one answer anyway, that is both quick and comprehensive, and that applies to both the traditional practice, and the earlier contemplative practice. One answer is that we practice our faith. Now, of course, faith is another tripwire word for some of us, Unitarian Universalists, so perhaps we could understand it just a little bit better. What is faith anyway, or at least what do I mean when I say faith, so that you'll know what I mean when you hear me say it. So in the litany I shared 2 weeks ago, I defined faith as a particular kind of story. A story of values and meaning. And of course, values and meaning are unprovable and immaterial. And so, by definition, it could be said that everyone has faith in something, or in many things. Even the most ardent atheist is a practitioner of faith. Even the most ardent atheist has values and meaning that guide them. Furthermore, when used in a religious context, which is to say this context, our context, faith has an implied intent. Now, I believe that intent is to dispel the grip of fear and to prepare us to respond to the world from our values rather than our reactivity. The intent of faith is to dispel the grip of fear and prepare us to respond to the world from our values rather than our reactivity. And though that was not easy to say, it is easier said than done. But in this way, we find freedom in faith. But because faith has to do with the unprovable, our values and meanings, it has the added dimension of conviction. Faith must be doubted, almost by definition. And in the same way that our inherent dignity is brought about by living with and in spite of our inherent fallibility and discontent, faith likewise is empowered by our questions. And this is simply to say that faith must have integrity. It would not do to have faith that you can shoot lasers out of your eyes. You can have that faith, but that faith lacks integrity. Strengthened by practice and tested by questions, the same way that muscles are strengthened by exertion, faith has the power to shape behavior and override our reactivity, thus securing our freedom. In this way, faith is like a program, like a computer program, like code. We program ourselves with our faith. But unlike code, faith takes maintenance. Although I actually have no idea if code takes maintenance. I don't think it does. I don't see our computer folks in here today. It does take maintenance?
It always changes.
It always changes. Okay, great.
Needs change.
Code takes maintenance too. Faith takes maintenance. Faith takes practice. That's what practice is, maintenance. So I would argue that what I have just described is true of all faiths, whether they call themselves a faith or not, and very much including our own. It is a neutral description, an observation. Our programming, which is to say our faith, can be used for good or for evil. So it does matter what our faith is. I'll get to that in a moment. First, I want to spend a little more time demonstrating the power of faith. It's hard to say the power of when we've been talking about Jedi earlier without saying the dark side. But this is not the dark side. This is the power of faith. The story of its power, the power of faith, provides the reason for why we need to practice it. It is powerful, so we better practice it. Remember, faith is a story. It is a story of values and meaning. But first, it is a story, which doesn't say anything about whether it's factual or not, or true or not. It is a story, though. And stories are immensely powerful. Stories are the vehicle of faith. And together, stories and faith shape the world, and they shape our behavior in it. Consider, in 2012, some folks at Ohio State University did an experiment wherein readers were asked to put themselves in a character's place while reading various stories. Even this really simple exercise resulted in changes of lived behavior. For instance, according to the study, when people identified with a protagonist who voted in the face of challenges, the readers were more likely to vote themselves later on. Okay. Personally, I'm here before you today because of a story, and it's relevant to what Linda's doing over in RE today. I saw Star Wars when I was 5. I wanted to be a Jedi, and minister was as close as I could get. That's true. It may not be correct, but it's true. Reflect on your own experience every day. Consider advertising. Advertising is meant to tell a story whose purpose is to influence what you do in a particular way. Your salvation is consumption. An entire economic sector is based on the formative and normative power of stories. If we buy the story, we are more likely to buy the product. And the hugely significant takeaway is that advertising leads to impulse. That is to say, the stories they tell not only shape our behavior, what we think we want to do, they shape our impulses. Now keep in mind that while stories may employ reason as a programming tool, they operate closer to the source of decision than reason does. In fact, reason frequently happens after the decision has been made, right? Stories operate viscerally, emotionally, instinctively, mythically. Advertising knows this, right? You know this. Reason is not enough. But the power of stories penetrate beyond behavior. They can affect biology. So here I am talking about placebo. I love placebo. In fact, if you're interested, I know a guy. I can hook you up. Now, you likely know that placebo is an inactive substance, like a look-alike sugar pill, or another form of sham therapy that's administered to a patient, usually to compare its effects with those of a real drug or real treatment. But the weird thing is that sometimes the placebo has more effect than the drug. And you could go online and Google placebo and find all kinds of wild stories. So I'm not going to give you a whole bunch of examples. I will give you a few. Like faith healers, right? That is basically the placebo effect. And within the limits of what is possible, this speaks to the power of faith. And my new favorite placebo story is about a widely replicated study of sleeping pills and placebos. And it turns out that just the color of a placebo pill had a measurable and consistent differentiating outcome. So it's no surprise that when told their sugar pill was a sleeping pill, subjects managed to sleep better than normal. That's an amazing testament to the power of the brain and the power of story, but it's actually not surprising. What is surprising and amazing is that in study after study all over the world, people who took a blue shade of sugar pill slept longer and better than those who took a red shade of sugar pill. With one exception, Italy. In Italy, men who took the blue pill slept less, while women who took the blue pill had the results that were consistent with the rest of the world. So normally the blue pill, you sleep better. Italy, if you're a woman, you take the blue pill, you sleep better. But if you take the blue pill and you're an Italian man, you sleep worse. And nobody really knows exactly why. But the speculation is that the Italian football team's color is blue. So that when men, who probably more men like football than, that was my Italian accent, I guess. When men saw the blue, it would excite them somehow, viscerally, deep level excite them, and they had trouble sleeping. And, you know, I had trouble sleeping last night. I saw a lot of maroon and gold going up and down the field. It was a beautiful thing. But, you know, so this actually, there's a huge and important takeaway. This has significant implications for the practice of faith. I've told you before about the hot and cold coffee experiment, where the temperature of coffee being held determined whether or not the holder of that coffee liked a photo of a stranger, right? The only difference was whether the coffee was hot or cold. And they would come up with all these other reasons, but the only consistent thing was the temperature of the coffee. And I use that as, proof of precognitive decision-making, right? That basically is an argument against free will as we commonly understand it. And then I try to reframe free will as preparation for that moment. So free will becomes how we elect to form our habits. Of course, that whole reframing hinged on the idea that what mattered most was how we were programmed with regards to whether or not we like our coffee hot or cold. And that's a story. It's rooted in our evolution and in our environment and, importantly, in our culture. And particularly that last bit implies that it is changeable. So with the right associations, intention, repetition, in short, with the right practices that reinforce our faith, our story of values and meaning, we can influence our own presets and thus regain some semblance of control over our behavior. That is to say, through practicing faith, freedom can be found. So that is why we practice faith. practice our faith, but what is our faith? Given that we are non-creedal, Unitarian Universalist, non-creedal, non-dogmatic, can we even claim a common faith? Can we claim one boat? I think we can. I think we have. Our faith claims that existence is interconnected and that each of us is bestowed with inherent worth and dignity. These are the bookend statements of our UU principles. If you want to look at them, they're in your service bulletin. Neither one of them are entirely provable. Both operate beyond material fact. They operate in the field of faith. I believe that when we put this faith into practice, it has the potential to change every person in this room. Because both of these claims are extremely difficult to consistently live. So I'm assuming that if we practice them consistently, they will continually change us. They're difficult. And that's a good thing. When faith comes easy, it's cheap and shallow. It may be easy to practice our faith for an adept, but they have earned their stripes by labor and attention. What's more, both inherent personal worth and existential interconnection have depths to plumb well beyond the initial challenge of their aspiration. They demand attention. They absolutely take maintenance. Or in other words, practice. Faith's formative power requires faithfulness while correcting unfaithfulness. What I mean is, you may not every day treat somebody that you encounter with dignity and respect. You may not feel your interconnection with them or with your environment. And then there is a dissonance between who you say you are and who you are acting like. This is an opportunity. This is where the story of our faith can call us out and call us forward. Allow the dissonance between your actions and who you say you are to offer a course correction. This is not to steer you into a swamp of guilt, though a little guilt is not such a bad thing when mistakes are made. But guilt is a teacher. It's not a state of being. Do not linger there, but rather turn your sights back to the aspiration, back to our story, back to your faith. And call yourself faithful so that you will be called continually into faithfulness. Now, I'd like you to take a minute here. Just focus on one of these two principles, the interconnected nature of existence or the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Think of one of those. Choose one. Now imagine yourself striving with some difficult situation. Could be a social interaction with a stranger or a loved one. It could be putting yourself in harm's way for the sake of some greater good. How does your focus on one of those principles grant you, in that moment, equanimity? How does it infuse you with the power to persevere according to your values? How does it bequeath to you freedom? Untouchable. This idea germinated for me as I was watching footage of people marching across the bridge in Selma the first time. People walking willingly into harm's way. And I thought, my God, what gives these people the strength? Because I've stood across from a cop in a riot gear. It is scary just standing next to them. I don't mean to cast aspersions on police officers, but just the power differential right there. And what we are both there to do is scary. Now, I'm about the most privileged person on the planet. I have a lot of privilege in that interaction right there. There are people who don't. And beyond that, there were times when that confrontation was going to turn violent. And you could think right now of the protesters up in the Dakotas, right? They're standing there in the face of dogs attacking them. What gives you faith? What gives you the power to persevere and to stand there to know that you are going to ultimately be okay? That's the power of faith. And we have access to that power. We have to do the work. We have to practice.